Did you know that Pompeii was missing for more than 1,500 years? The eruption of the Vesuvius volcano that buried Pompeii was triggered on August 24, 79, and after destroying the city, the annals of history kept the fact and the passage of time made forget the exact location, until, in 1711, a peasant named Giovanni Battista found a piece of marble while digging a well. Statues appeared 20 meters away, and by order of Charles III of Spain, excavations were organized, and the villa appeared with numerous petrified corpses that looked as if they had suddenly turned to stone, including the body of a mother breastfeeding her child. Did you know what was the first transgenic animal in history? It was created in 1982. Scientists Palmiter and Brinster injected the rat hormone gene into newly fertilized eggs, giving birth to what became known as transgenic mice, which were gigantic specimens. And in 1988 Harvard obtained the patent for a genetically engineered animal, a mouse carrying human genes capable of causing cancer. Did you know that it was not Johannes Gutenberg who published the Gutenberg Bibles, which are the first books printed with the printing press invented by the German? Gutenberg prepared the plates for the Bible, but when he was about to begin publishing, he ended up in ruins and was forced to give up his instruments and presses, and indirectly, the right to be the first person to print the most printed book in the world history. Did you know what was the first single-person strike in recorded history? It was called by the Greek orchestra conductor Aristos in Rome in 300 BC. Aristos refused to continue working if he was not given enough time to eat. Either way, he achieved his goal. Did you know that a shepherd destroyed the fourth wonder of antiquity? It was the Temple of Artemis, the goddess of the moon and the hunt, of Ephesus, located in Asia Minor. It is said that it was an incredible white marble building 130 meters long and supported by 120 Ionic columns 20 meters high. It is said that the shepherd Erostratus, to become one of the most famous arsonists in history, burned down the temple to immortalize his name. Did you know on what date human beings were born in all the continents of the planet? It was until the recent date of 1978, since in that year the child Emilio Marco Palma was born in an Argentinian base in Antarctica. Until then the white continent had never seen life emerge. Did you know that in London a blacksmith was executed for using a type of coal? In the Middle Ages it was already known that both humidity and gases were the main causes of deterioration of the stones in monuments. Emperor Frederick II issued strict orders to keep the air clean in 1240, to the point where a blacksmith was executed in 1306 in London for using high sulfur coal. Did you know that a person survived a fall of almost 7,000 meters from an airplane? It was the Russian Colonel M. Chizov, who had to jump from the damaged plane at 6,700 meters above sea level. He did not open his parachute intentionally so as not to be an easy target for the enemies and was lucky enough to fall on the side of a snowy mountain which he slipped down. Despite having multiple fractures, he miraculously survived. Did you know that the prophetess of the Oracle of Delphi had to be ugly and old? At first, the Pythias or priestesses of the Oracle of Delphi were young and beautiful virgins, who were required to take a vow of chastity. But in the 7th century BC a Greek from the Thessaly region could not control his baser instincts and abused a Pythia. This fact caused that from that moment on, the Pythonesses were intentionally ugly and over 50 years old. Did you know that God was tried and sentenced to death? In 1917 a Soviet state trial against God was held in Moscow. The court found God guilty of the charges and sentenced him to death, the sentence being carried out by means of a rifle charge aimed at the sky. Did you know that the London police paid people to go to jail? The London police, which would later become Scotland Yard, had very precarious means, so they were forced to pay a few shillings to a few men who entered the jail as infiltrated prisoners and prevented the escape of other prisoners. Did you know that in Vienna it was forbidden to dance the waltz? In an edict of the Austrian Empire in 1785, the entire Viennese court was prohibited from dancing the waltz. It was intended to stop the madness for this type of dance that prevailed in the court of Central Europe. Did you know that in Russia taxes were charged for wearing a beard? In 1698, the Russian Tsar Peter I the Great, trying to equalize the appearance of his citizens with respect to the European standard, promulgated a decree with which he could collect taxes for wearing beards. Noblemen or merchants had to pay 1,000 rubles to keep their beards, and common citizens paid 1 kopeck per beard. To enforce the decree, The Tsar placed many collectors at the gates of the cities and also barbers. Did you know that a gardener became king for 23 years? Enlil Bani was the gardener of Era Imadi, the king of Ishin, one of the two cities that dominated Babylon. One of the New Year traditions is that a person could be elected king for one day, and after that day, he would be sacrificed to the gods. But while the gardener reigned, it so happened that the official king died, so Enlil Bani remained in office for 23 years. Did you know that Charlemagne got his name from killing a bear with his bare hands? According to legend, the Emperor Charlemagne decided to destroy a giant bear that he had terrified the locals of a region of the Vosges. In a fight on a rock, he ended the life of the bear with his own hands. According to this narration, that was the first time that this king was acclaimed with Carlos the Great, that is, Charlemagne. Did you know what the longest strike in history was? The longest declared strike on record ended on January 4, 1961, after 33 years. It concerned the employment of hairdressers' assistants in Copenhagen, the capital of Denmark. Did you know who was the first European to be mayor of a city in China? It is about the Venice traveler Marco Polo, who gained the confidence of Emperor Kublai Khan and was appointed mayor of the city of Yangdachao. He held the position for 3 years. Did you know how much American Indians were paid for the island of Manhattan? In 1626, the Dutchman Peter Minuit bought the island of Manhattan, the nucleus of present-day New York, from the Native American Indians. The price he paid was ridiculous: a lot of glass beads, red rags, and copper buttons, all told, about $24 at the time. Did you know that the British Crown is prohibited from leaving the country? Currently, there is an old law in force that prohibits the Crown from leaving England. For this reason, when George V decided to be crowned Emperor of India in Delhi in 1911, a replica of the crown used in the ceremony had to be made. Did you know that Miguel Ángel Buonarroti had his face disfigured in a fight? When he was young, the Italian sculptor, painter, architect and engineer had such a hot temper that on one occasion he got into a fight with his classmate Torrigiano. From that fight, Miguel Ángel came out with a disfigured nose for life. Did you know that Tintoretto painted a temporary error in one of his paintings? The Italian Renaissance painter Tintoretto painted a realistic reproduction of the exodus of the Hebrews from Egypt to the Promised Land. The painting was called The Israelites Gathering Manna in the Desert. The painting showed the Jews being led by Moses with a noticeable time error. They were loaded with shotguns. Did you know what was the worst volcanic eruption in history? It was that of the Indonesian volcano Tambora, located on the island of Sumbawa. Its crater released an energy equivalent to 1 million atomic bombs like the one in Hiroshima. Because of the eruption itself and famine, 90,000 people died and temperatures in the northern hemisphere dropped 5 degrees. Did you know the curious risk that Stanley Kubrick asked for insurance? During the filming of the 1968 film 2001, A Space Odyssey, the flamboyant Stanley Kubrick was worried that a sudden alien invasion would turn his film into nonsense, to the point of trying to get Lloyd's Insurance to agree to cover insurance against at risk. It was not successful. Did you know that initially the cross was not the Christian symbol? At first, Christians used other symbols, such as fish, to identify themselves, but in the year 312, Constantine II the Great, when he was going to a battle, he found a large cross that had written in hoc signo vinces, with this sign you will conquer. Since then, he ordered that from then on it appear on the banners of his troops, and years later at the Council of Nicaea he decreed that the cross be adopted as an official symbol of the Christian religion. Did you know why coins have grooved edges? Before the appearance of banknotes, coins were made of noble metals, so many people filed their edges to obtain a metal powder that they later sold. That is the reason for the grooved edges, since if these marks became visible, the coins were automatically cancelled. Did you know when was the first extraterrestrial birth? The first birth of a living being in space occurred on the Soviet satellite Incubator 2. On July 28, 1979, a Japanese quail laid an egg in space aboard this satellite, and the egg successfully hatched in orbit. Did you know that Juana la Loca gave birth in the toilet? On February 25, 1500, Queen Juana I, called Juana la Loca, felt unwell while in Ghent and retired to the toilet, where she surprisingly gave birth to her son Carlos, who years later would be crowned Carlos I, King of Spain. Did you know who was the first president in history? The first person to officially receive that title, which did not exist until then, was the American George Washington. The position was so novel that many people proposed that Washington be named king. Did you know what was the shortest reign in history? Luís Felipe ascended the Portuguese throne with the title of Luís III and suffered a fatal wound the same day that his father, Carlos I, was murdered. This tragic event took place on February 1, 1908. Surprisingly, Luís Felipe died just 20 minutes after his father, making his reign the most short-lived in recorded history. Did you know that the most impressive gathering of individuals united by a shared goal was in India? If you like historical curiosities, don't forget to subscribe as we upload one here every day. It was made up of 15 million people who joined in the Kumbh Mela festival, of Hindu tradition. This event took place at the intersection of the Yamuna, Ganges and Sarasvati riverbeds, in the city of Allahabad, on the 6th day of February in the year 1989.